Technology.
Hello, everyone. What day is it? It's Thursday. Welcome to another episode of Cut the Shit, Cue the Genius. So excited to be here with all of you today. Look at all these friendly industry faces. We've been having so much fun on the Webisodes every week, chatting it up and talking about things that we think are interesting to us and hopefully therefore interesting to the industry. Very happy to be here with my co-hosts, Dahlia and Michelle. Hello, ladies. Good morning.
Hi.
Liz.
Happy Thursday.
And hello to all those who are already watching. I know we'll have more join as well. You guys are the geniuses, so thanks for joining. We very much look forward every time to your comments. They give us so much inspiration. We love the comments, the questions, all of it. So start now, please, by wherever you're watching. Put something in the chat. Let us know that you're here. We will bring those comments on throughout the episode to do our best to integrate you, because we're doing this to have the conversation with all of you. So Michelle, let me kick it over to you to introduce today's topic.
Thanks, Liz. Okay, so I was thinking about this topic. I'm always thinking about it. Well, because number one, the planet is freaking burning down. And coincidentally, I had the pleasure of working with Michael Shapiro, who I will introduce in a second, on a report about how the industry is really treating one portion of sustainability. And I thought it was a really good topic that our audience could chime in on, because I feel like we started talking about this about 30 years ago, making meetings green and all of this stuff. And here we are 30 years later. Everything is going to hell in a handbasket, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. And we're still sort of being very superficial about sustainability. So we're going to talk with Michael Shapiro, who is with Northstar. And I've known you, Michael, for a number of years as, friends and co-writers and editors. And now you've really hit the jackpot with Northstar, in your job. And William, I don't know you as much. We imported you this morning from Europe. I think I don't even know where you live, but we'll be able to tell that you're Scottish when you start talking. But you have since devoted a large portion of your time and career to studying sustainability. And with your background in meetings, it's very important that we have your insight and guidance on where we go from here. So I wanted to possibly kick off the conversation with you, William, to at least talk about defining sustainability. It's not just, throwing your recyclables in a blue can.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle, and hello everyone who's watching. Yeah, I think that's a really good place to start, because Michael's report interviewed 352 meeting planners, and I think, Michael, if you'd said, tell me what sustainability means to you, you would have probably got 352 different responses back. Because it really is not something that's clear to everyone. What do we mean when we mean sustainability? And the term sustainability has been around for about 30 years. In the early 90s, I think it was the Rio Conference in 1992, sustainable development was defined. And this was looking at the environment and society, and also environment, society, and the economy. And how do we make that sustainable? And sustainability was defined as, how do we make sure that everyone has a fair use of the current resources in a way that they're going to be able to be used by people who are not yet born? And that's what sustainability means. Just take a few seconds to think about that, and then think, well, how is that relevant to running an event? When you're an event manager, how are you thinking about the use of resources that people are going to be able to use in the future? So sustainability is a really good term, and these kind of catch-all terms, especially in environmental policy, are really useful if you want to get everyone on the same page and everyone in a room, who's interested in sustainability. Yeah, I know roughly what that means. Let's get together and talk about it. But once you're in that room, then the job has to be much more about, well, what do we mean by sustainability? What can you do to forward these goals? And that's where the Sustainable Development Goals were introduced by the United Nations, to try and say, well, here's I can't remember if it's 15 or 19 now, and here are these goals. Let's try and let's try and focus on these because they can help us develop sustainably. So there's so much kind of background to this term. I think it's really important that we think about sustainability in a much wider term, and that includes things like, you know, ensuring that the staff who work at your venue are being paid a living wage. You know, that's a real part of a sustainable event, a sustainable industry. You know, how are you making sure that, you know, that when you come to a city, they're glad to have had you and that you've added something to that city when you leave. So these are all things that I think individuals, events businesses, and the events industry has to think about when they're considering sustainability. You know, Michael, how do you cover that in a 14-page report? Impossible, but that's the type of thing I think we really need to think about.
If I can jump in with a question there, I think how you measure that when the term can be so broadly defined is really the biggest challenge everyone's facing right now. And that's what we were trying to do with the report, is see, you know, how formalized is this in the meetings industry? What are people doing? You know, we're finding only 40% of people who responded actually even have sustainability policies, and 30% of the overall respondents are actually measuring any sustainability efforts. So I think we have to sort of go back to the beginning. Not only how are we defining this, but how do you formalize that and set it up so it's something that can be measured and tracked in your company, right? And then I don't know how broadly you want to talk about the report right now, if we want to stick on.
Yeah, I think we should jump into some kind of salient points.
Okay, I mean, in terms of the definition, we recognized that a lot of people are thinking about it in terms of ESG, environmental social governance. A lot of people are thinking about it in terms of the UN sustainability goals. So, you know, we asked, you know, what percentage of the policies of the 40% who have policies, you know, what percentage cover environmental impact of your events, and only 72% said that environmental impact was addressed in their sustainability policy. 75%, I believe, I just have the numbers in front of me. 75% said their sustainability policy covers CSR initiatives. So that would, you know, be related more to the social aspect of it. And then 76% said DEI is included in their sustainability policy. So I think there's a recognition that all of these aspects of sustainable meetings are very important. But then also, I think there's a lot of confusion, or at least hesitancy, in terms of formalizing how we're going to measure the environmental impact as well. You know, I think you mentioned before we were chatting that in a way it's easy to talk about sustainability as environmental because you can talk about it as measuring, you know, emissions. There are things you can measure, but I think especially in the United States, people aren't sure exactly what parameters to be using, especially with respect to meetings and how broad that should be. So I think we've got a long way to go in terms of not only defining sustainability, but then figuring out how to formalize it in meetings programs, right?
Yeah, and I think 76% sounds like a big number, really, to me. But when you dig down deeper, it's like they say that they are somewhat committed because they have this sort of policy, they meaning organizations across the board. We're talking about independent meeting planning companies and corporate planners and, you know, associations and all that. However, when you dig down deep, they are also relying on venues, and they're relying on other people. And if they have to actually take money out of their pocket to do something, you know, to go above and beyond on sustainability, they're actually really not doing that. A pretty small percentage, in my recollection, is actually going above and beyond. They're doing like the baseline things mostly. So it's like they're talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk.
I think there's also, you know, I also spent a lot of time just looking at the write-in answers for the other questions and the contributions that people wrote in addition to the data itself. And, you know, I think we're looking at, especially people without policies, the largest percentage of people are doing what the venue has in place, right? We were sort of looking at that as, you know, a minimal effort, right? If you're doing only what the client wants or only what the venue has in place, then you're not doing above and beyond. But, to be fair, I think this is showing how dependent we are as an industry on what destinations and venues are doing. They can lead the way to some extent. And also, a lot of people wrote in and said, look, I am doing what my clients require because I don't have much of a choice. I'm an independent planner, and I can give them multiple estimates for here's what I would recommend with using these sustainable practices, but here are different price points, and that clients are just not prioritizing sustainability efforts right now. We asked another question about what's driving the decisions, and still the effects of COVID are outweighing sustainability concerns on that chart in terms of what's driving the decision making. So
Well, it's kind of it's obvious now after the Corona coaster that the venues and the cities are hurting for many, many factors. And will this slow down the efforts that we want to take as an industry or as professionals when it comes to sustainability, with all the pillars that Thomson talked about, for example? Because what's going to start happening is us as organizers, as event profs, like you said, Shapiro, we need to lead the way. So you now have organizers that are not going to cities that have anti-abortion, policies in place. And how come we can't get to a point? 30 years we've been talking about be sustainable, be conscious of what you are doing when you come as an event organizer to a city, to a venue, etc. We're still talking about it. We're talking about a lot of things, to a point where my kids are like, didn't you just say that like 50 years ago? I'm not 50 years old, but I'm just saying. But what I'm trying to get at, if in any time of our era right now, for us to be the drivers and to be the decision makers and to help make change, because Thomson, you talking about sustainability and the report talking about sustainability, we're blowing it up. It used to be about food. It used to be about food shortage. It used to be about the venue. Now we're talking society. We're talking DEI. And we also have to keep in mind, if we do not address sustainability now, you have the younger generation that will be the drivers for us. And they will say, I will not come to your events. I will not come to anything you put together unless you have these points in place.
And you're doing it.
And you're doing it. So you gotta do it. You gotta show it. So, I'm a little frustrated with all of this sustainability, because it's like we're pointing fingers. Well, the venue is not sustainable or is not certified. What does that mean? You chose it. You knew.
Well, Dalia, I think I agree with all of you, everything you've said there. But I think there's a point above that which is much more worrying for the events industry, and this is that we have to, and as an event organizer of nearly 30 years now, this is something that I kind of had an epiphany maybe 4 or 5 years ago on this. But
is that why you went to school?
Yeah, probably, partly. But we have an industry that is inherently unsustainable, and we have to start from that position. And this is a really difficult thing. There's a lot of industries, agriculture, for example. If you're a farmer rearing cattle, you have an incredibly unsustainable business, and you're in an unsustainable industry. And most people would recognize that. If you're in the oil and gas industry, it's unsustainable. You need to get out of that industry. Now, I would say that the events industry is in a similar position, and it's specifically talking about business events. And I think that we have to realize that the current products that we have can't just be tweaked to be sustainable and environmental by, changing your seating supplier or making sure that your venue has renewable electricity. The business events industry is substantially unsustainable. And if you look at one of our big products, which is an exhibition, if you had to design something that was as unsustainable as possible, you would design an exhibition. And this is how far we are and how far we need to travel. An exhibition is a temporary city that's put together for a few days using a huge amount of resource, a huge amount of emissions, goes into a venue which is massive, which is empty for a large part of the year, which takes a lot of money and resources to heat. And then they rip that all down again, taking all that extra energy and the resources, and then they ship it back to wherever it came from. Thousands of people might have traveled across the country in a plane, or across the country or across the world in a plane to come to that exhibition. And after 4 or 5 days, another company comes in and does exactly the same. You could not find a product which is more unsustainable than an exhibition. And we have to realize these things, and we have to look at some of our products and say, how do we deliver this with 90% less resources, 90% less emissions? Not how do we replace plastic badges with paper? And that's the challenge for the events industry. And that's what we have to own up to. We can't just say in the background and say we can do this, we can do that, what's everyone else doing? We've got to make substantial and significant changes to the way that we run our events and the products that we offer if we're going to become sustainable. And that's a challenge. That's a huge challenge.
So we've reached the point in the program where we have cut the shit. This is as cutting as it gets. So, okay.
We have not only cut the shit, I think we gave a couple of people heart attacks, and they are
like all of us.
Moment. So,
I'd love to hear what people think, because you don't hear someone in the events industry say that. And I'm in a good position because I run my own company. I don't have to report to anyone. I can say things. If someone doesn't want to employ me in the future, it doesn't matter. But we need people who believe this to speak out, because the industry is moving at a glacier pace.
But here's the beauty of that, and you have an amazing, great point. We have, and this came up in the last couple of episodes. We are still within our industry designing for what the organizer, for what the business thinks is right. The trade show component, the big loud dinners, all of this. Hi, Kenji. Well, if Kenji agrees, then yeah, you got a new friend, Thomson, right there. But what I'm saying is, we got to stop designing for us. We got to stop designing events to make up for the past. Like you have to design for what the attendees want. Nobody asked you to have a sit-down dinner with 4-course meal that nobody picks on, because I don't know. I've never had, I'm sure Tracy has a lot to say about this, but what I'm saying is, like, this is the time to sort of reevaluate. Why are we having these events? What can we make it that, like, in what design aspect can we, like, bring in that sort of just demolishes how we've been doing it before, for a lot of different reasons, especially for our universe, our ecosystem, our society. And you're absolutely right. We go in, we bring in thousands of people to a city, we create havoc from the cab ride to the airport to the hotel to the one barista that is at Starbucks who's handling 7,000 lattes with I don't know what kind of milk, and we are creating havoc when we come to the city. So how are we going to change that?
Well, as long as we're cutting the shit.
Let's cut the shit.
Michael's thinking, that college education for my son, down the tubes. I better change careers now. Yeah.
In a sense, isn't that benefiting our industry to look at this sustainability as more broadly than the environmental impact we're having? Because we can't make a good case that we're not having a big environmental impact by having a big exhibition in a city, right? So we focus as well on making sure that the community benefits in some way from that event happening, that people are paid, that there's revenue brought into the city, that it's going to the right places, that the community is benefiting as a result. So when we're talking about sustainability in a broader sense, we're talking about the sustainability of our industry, right? And here's why it's sustainable, because we're bringing this much good
Yeah. I didn't realize we'd cut the shit already. I've got much more to throw at you. If you want to know.
All right.
This is
lot of
your
shit.
stage.
Double
Thomson.
setting is at a different. You're starting at a different spot. So.
I think. So, again, it was good to get a little bit of feedback from the audience there, and I think this conversation is really important to have. And I also think it's important to have people who think I'm talking absolute nonsense and who will stand up and defend. And I think that's really, really important. When I run events and when I've attended events, what I've started to do now is just in my mind, think about all of the resources that went into that event. The time, the effort, the thousands of people's flights, time from the office, and kind of put that all up on one side of the scale, right? And then look at the other side and think, and what's the value that's been delivered from this event? Considering all those resources and all those admissions, what's the value? And I know that we have all been to events when that there's not even the slightest chance that those scales will tip. And this is what I mean about sustainable events, is that there's so many events happen that at the end of it, we're not worth the resources and the emissions and everything that went into it. And this is a huge issue, and it's been an issue for the events industry as long as I've been in it. There is a huge amount of events which are garbage. And one of the main reasons is that we've got an industry that's set up that's at the moment very profitable. And if you're a shareholder in a big exhibition company or a big conference company, you don't want to change anything because you don't want to embrace the risk of the change that your profit and your revenue is going to reduce. And I've done consultancy. I've gone into these big industries and say, you've got to change. Here's all the things that you have to do. And they say, brilliant, that's fantastic. Then they take it to the board and the board say, we're not spending £1 million on a sustainability drive because that's my profit. No chance. Let's do what we're doing. We're earning loads of money. So there's huge issues for the industry to address, not just about our product, but actually not and how the product's made, but what's delivered at the end of it. And, one thing for the events industry should be that right now, let's say let's say next year, there's 1 million business events delivered. Why don't we work together and try and deliver 900,000 events this year? And then next year, 800,000 events, and then the following year, but actually taper off the amount of events that we organize so that we can make these events that do happen add much more value and be much more beneficial. And these are the things that I believe, not just the events industry, but industries have got to address as a whole. We can't keep growing. Every single person who runs an event, their boss says to them, we want to be bigger next year. We want to attract more people next year. As an industry, we cannot do that. We cannot grow. We can't always grow. At some point, we've got to say, basta, enough. This is where we are. Be happy with what we've got. And that's a fundamental shift for so many people in the events industry to take. But that's where we need to go. We need to say, we've got a venue, it's got 5,000 people, that's capped. We're not going to sell 6,000 tickets. We're going to sell 5,000. If you want to attend, you can attend online. But our event is not getting any bigger because of the huge emissions and resources that are used in this event. This is our cap. These are the things that the industry needs to do, not badges, bottles, and dropping off some food at the food bank. If we're allowed to cut the shit.
We are allowed to cut the shit, and you should never ask for permission to cut the shit. This is what this is all about. I have been to several events lately where it could have been a Zoom call. I kid you not, where I would invite you people and even more that are in the comments right now and just have my event, basically. The thing that it also I find very strange is that you have these event organizers that truly think, yes, face-to-face is going to come back, which is an oxymoron in my head. But they have nixed their entire digital presence, thinking that we can't do digital anymore. We won't do virtual anymore. We will do only face-to-face. So from a sustainability perspective, digital does work, but it also works for different audiences that they've been nurturing for the last couple of years. So this is a question for Thomson. What do you think of organizers that are just canceling all their digital events?
Well, they're going to be back to digital, and they're going to be forced back to digital rather than doing it by choice. And at the start of the year, I modelled the UK business events industry up to 2050. And I'll share that document with you, and you could, so if anyone wants it, I'm sure I'll put a link in the comments or something like that. But it just basically looked at the events industry and said, here's two scenarios. One of them is the UK events industry continues on a digital path and starts to attract more national delegates. And that was one path. And then the other path was, we just do the same as now. We drop digital and we just keep going after these really lucrative Americans who will come to London or Manchester and spend loads of money. And that was the two scenarios. And until 2040, both scenarios are a little bit similar, but the business as usual, earning more money than the let's be sustainable. But after 2040, there's a huge dip, because in 2040, companies start charging $100 plus for a ton of carbon. So businesses, and that's happening now already, and businesses are saying to the members of staff, if you want to go to this event, there's an internal charge that we've got to pay of $100 every ton of carbon. And if you fly New York to San Francisco and back, I think that's 2 tons of carbon. So that's an extra $200 that the business has got to pay for you to attend this event, plus your event fee, plus your transport, plus everything that's there. We're not going to do that anymore. We can't afford it because we need to hit net zero, and we have to reduce our emissions. So you're not going to that event. And that's where things start really tailoring off. And you see an industry that was investing in digital, investing in national consumers, is looking at hubs where they're bringing people together in cities and attending a master event that's maybe somewhere else. This industry goes up to 2050. It's more profitable than it was in 2030. But the other train of the business as usual, it's dead by 2050 because people realize too late that digital's where they should be. And all those people are already attending other digital events. And they think, we need to go for our own national audience now. But they're already attending other events and they're familiar with other events. So this is a very simple model path. But I think it's really pertinent for any industry. You've got to start focusing on sustainability and digital and a domestic audience, or an audience that can travel without carbon, for there to be a future for the business events industry. And the final thing I say, I only model business events because this conversation that I'm having shouldn't be talking about festivals or holidays, because these are the things that in a well-being economy you want people to be doing. I want to be traveling to Australia to see my family. That's much more valuable for society than me traveling to Australia to go to an IT conference, right? Or I want to be going to see the Hives next week in Madrid, right? A band. I don't want to be going to a conference in Bilbao.
I was going to ask, who are the Hives?
The Hives are a fantastic band, Northern European band, but it's kind of rocky, punky. But this is where our industry has to, business events have got to be really low down the list of things that people spend their carbon budget on. And if you're all given an individual carbon budget, you'll go to see the Hives, you'll go and visit your family, you won't go to an events exhibition in Frankfurt. So these are fundamental things our industry's got to consider if it wants to stay relevant, and if you want to stay in the events industry. These fundamental things have to change.
Well,
those are fantastic points, and like one of the few promising things in this, and I don't want to editorialize too much, but this was sort of a promising aspect of the research, is that 39% of all the planners said, yes, they're making some events virtual or hybrid for sustainability reasons. 61% of planners who have policies in place said they're doing the same. So they haven't forgotten about virtual and digital entirely, according to this study, especially as it relates to sustainability, despite what we're hearing in the marketplace and seeing the tech companies experience. But I also wanted to touch on your other point, William, which is that I think that it is really important to separate out business events, because the meetings industry is so intertwined with the travel industry, and we all personally are lovers of travel. And this is part of the problem, is that we've got stakeholders here who don't want to see the death of travel, right? So how can we reevaluate the way we're measuring the value of business meetings in a way that all of the stakeholders are happy with, where it's not just, you need to bring this many more people to this exhibition next year for it to be a feasible undertaking.
Yeah. But we're an industry that's always gone on numbers. A successful exhibition as an event, as an exhibition that attracted more attendees than last year. This growth is baked into almost every single industry, and that's a huge challenge, because just trying to reduce when you stand still is hard enough, but to reduce your resources and your emissions when you're continuing to grow, as I believe with all of the scientific papers I've read in the last year, it's impossible over the long term. Decoupling this idea of growth from resource use is I think the evidence is there that's impossible. And this is what we are saying to every single industry. You can keep growing and you can cut your emissions and your resource use, and that's just not feasible. And at some point, governments right down to individuals have got to realize that they've got to start consuming a lot less. And there's no country more important for this to start than the States, because it's the country that consumes most emissions per capita and most resources per capita. And if we can start making that move in America with the events industry, then we really can make an impact. But it's got to be so much more than just these kind of tweaks. I often use the phrase flicking a pea at a charging rhino, and this is what the events industry is doing. There's this climate crisis and this biodiversity crisis that's already happening, flooding paddy fields and agricultural land in South Asia, and bringing tornadoes and huge heat episodes and events across the planet. This is already happening. And because the emissions that have been released aren't fully having effect in the atmosphere, even if we stop now, we have much more damaging climate episodes coming. And we're not doing anything meaningful to stop that. And as an industry, we can make a big difference. But first, we have to realize what the problem is, how big it is, and start thinking about the fundamental things that we can do to make those changes.
So how do you have that very hard, harsh, real conversation with the C-suite or the bubble above? Because like you said, they only think of the money, or they only think of the losses, or they only think of the risk. What are the top 3 things that our event profs that are listening in right now can infuse in a conversation that we need to do this right now? We need to look at sustainability from all these angles, all these pillars right now. And because
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is look at what's happening in the fossil fuel industry. And the fossil fuel industry has followed what happened in the tobacco industry. And, the fossil fuels from the early 90s knew that the fossil fuel industry knew that what they were doing was causing global warming. They didn't quite know the extent of what global warming would do, but they certainly knew that it was going to cause huge problems, and they didn't stop. And we have to realize as an events industry that we know the damage that we're doing when we're using all these resources and using all these emissions. We know we can't hide from it. And if you were to look at yourself in 20 years' time, knowing that you knew this and thinking, why didn't I stop? And if the reason that you didn't stop was because you wanted to earn a little bit more money, then you've got to realize that our planet doesn't have a future. And that is a crucial important element of any industry, is at some point to say enough is enough. But I would say to all those event planners, if you're working for a company who don't believe this, if you're putting in all this, if you want to make changes and you're putting in all this effort and it's being ignored, consider going off on yourself. I would never suggest you take a database with you, right? But go off yourself and start running events which are much more sustainable, because your market is huge compared to the dying market for these people who will go to events.
So we just had another holy shit moment where you just told people to leave their jobs. So
it's happening.
There we go.
It's happening. I'm lucky.
The industry's dying. Leave your
I did
job.
that and I was able to do it. I did that and I was able to do it. And as an events planner, you've not really got, even if you're a senior event planner in a business, you've not got much power. But if you want to go off and set something yourself, then you can make sure it's sustainable as possible. I mean, I run a 100% virtual digital training business, and it's a really successful, makes a good profit business. So I went off and did it. And that's the reason I set up the virtual event campus, was because I could see the amount of the impact that virtual and digital can have on the environment and on resource use. So it is to try and empower people to say, if you believe this, go and do it, because trying to do it within this kind of, behemoth, which is a corporate exhibition or event company, is really, really difficult. But if you're in a small SME, put the investment in and you'll see the returns, not just financially, but kind of ethically and morally, because you will be able to make a difference.
Liz has been quiet this whole time.
I have been so quiet. But I think it comes down to individual decisions, that this is something that you truly value. I think, going off on your own is a huge move, and I encourage people to do it. But as Dahlia said earlier, the younger generation is going to make decisions about what they spend their money on, how they spend their time, where they go, based on whether or not it lines up with what they value. And it makes a huge business case for companies to start thinking about what that might look like. But the only way that's going to change is if we are holding these events accountable. If you don't go to these large exhibits because it's not sustainable and you don't believe that it's good use, every human, when we make our decision to go to an event, we are doing the same scale that you were talking about, William, where is it worth? And that could be that, from a resource standpoint, it's the time off, it's the time away from my family, it's the travel time, it's the cost. And I don't think even enough people are making that decision to withdraw from things that don't tip the scale. They go because everyone else is going, or they go because their boss wants them to go. Or we have to have, first of all, we have to know what the heck we believe in and what we value. And then you have to make decisions based on it. You have to say, sounds like a great event. Sorry, I'm going to miss everyone. I'll see you online. And that digital piece just kills me. I mean, I see these people are just pretending like digital sucks. Well, how about we invest some resources? All that money that you're spending on your bad in-person events, put it towards some thought and strategy around great technology and great use of virtual, and watch what we could do. But as an industry, I don't think we're going to find big corporations make the moves that just shift the whole industry. It has to be the individuals who are going to hold these corporations accountable.
Well, I think two points to that, Liz. Is the first one is that when I modeled the industry in 2050, there was still a big, successful physical business events industry, but it didn't have international guests. And it was maybe 25% of meetings were still physical, but the vast majority of them were online or were in a kind of digital metaverse. But there's got to be a place for people meeting. It's a fundamentally important thing that we do, sure, but it can't be the focus for all of our business. And then the final thing to say is, we should be making the decisions, but we've got our kind of belief and our confidence up against billion-dollar marketing industries and people who are experts in manipulation and selling, and we've got to make these decisions up against these huge institutions and industries, and that's really difficult. And we're an inherently weak species who do follow the crowd, who do seek the pleasures now rather than the putting off the pleasure till later. That's what we do. So these are incredibly different. It's incredibly difficult. And this leads to the role of government. And I don't think we're too far away from governments mandating net zero policies for any business over maybe 50 employees. And I think by 2040, we might be in a position where everyone has a carbon budget and you're only able to spend X amount of carbon on the things that you do, because it comes to a point that if we leave this to individuals, then we don't solve the climate crisis. Governments have to step in, and we have to support governments to do that. But there's no real other option, because what we've tried to do since we realized the problems in the early 90s has made no significant difference, and things have to change. And I believe the events industry can be part of that change.
I have to just go to this one comment because I have something to say about it. I know we're late. We have to wrap up soon. Shauna says, just a reminder, it's not on all individual planners to save the world. To what you're saying, William, our associations must speak up for what the event sector needs to decarbonize. I think in general around sustainability, but the problem is our associations are maybe some of the largest offenders. So they would have to dramatically change what they're doing and how they do business to then speak up for what our industry should be doing. Just putting that out there. I mean, it would be great if they were representing the industry that we all need to pivot towards, but I don't think that's the case.
I don't know what's
Not
gonna happen.
happening right now.
I don't know what's going to happen that makes a difference. Sorry, Dahlia.
No, don't apologize. I mean, it's not happening with our industry associations. There is not any transparency when it comes to sustainability of the events that they are putting on right now. It always seems that the bigger the better. The bigger the numbers, the better. The bigger the footprint, the better. You know, yes, they try to do CSR activations, etc., in the cities that they're in, but it needs to be quicker and it needs to be faster. Bless you. So I don't know if we can really rely on the industry associations in order to, catapult us to where we need to be. One thing that I just want to tell everybody, I know that we're over our time, but it seems that this is a very interesting, yes, Jan, we're going to save the world, but it seems like this is a topic that's on everybody's mind. So we're going to give it another 10 minutes or so. The other thing is, I know that people have been trying to get to the reports that William referred to, as well as the Northstar report. So we will have that on our page, which is dahliaplus.com/QTheGenius, so that you can have it there and then download. We do want to continue the conversation for sure. There was a question from Irina. Hi, Irina. Question to the panelists. What do you think about fam trips? Are they sustainable? So who wants to take this one?
Well, my answer is a quick one. So I don't know if Shapiro wants to head in after this. No, completely not. I don't think there should be any space for incentives or fam trips in an industry that really wants to be sustainable. All those resources should be doing something else, something that adds much more value than becoming a big part of this.
So let's give them ideas. What can they do instead of fam trips? Thank you, Karen.
Well, but what's the point of having a fam trip if we're then saying that we don't want them to go, even if they loved the destination after they went on the fam trip?
So in order for destinations to show their everything they can offer, how can they do that without having an in-person fam trip? Digitally? Metaverse? What are we saying?
Well, I think you've got to look at why is the destination thinking that its job is to have people travel from all across the globe to its destination? Destinations trying to be sustainable as well, but still keen to have people flying all over the globe and using up all of these resources. So, I think every industry has got to look to this, and I think a sustainable venue says we will market to anyone who can travel, let's say in Europe, who can travel to us by train. But we are not going to advertise. We're going to cut our links with airlines. We're going to try and attract as many people as possible who come on decarbonised transport. But I've seen events, and the FAM team have travelled across the globe 3 times in a year to check something out. I mean, that's just not sustainable. Businesses can't afford to do that, right. and morally they shouldn't be doing that. There's nothing wrong with going and seeing. And seeing a venue once, but sometimes taking 17 different people over on a fam trip, And
it has to be better qualified. I've gotten those emails, apply for this fam trip, and it's like, would you ever consider doing business ever in this destination? There's nothing in the pocket. And I just have chosen not to go. But there are plenty of planners who are like, hey, free trip to wherever the location is. But, I think if you're actively wanting to host an event in a particular location, a site visit makes sense to me, and with limited resources, send a person to go check it out. But fam trips, I think, are just, a lot of marketing money spent for not a lot of return for them or for the planners who are attending.
The difference between a site recce and a fam trip,
Different.
going to see a venue in a city where you're going and making sure that it's what you want is really important practically for a planner. But going for a jolly, as we would say, it's not really what
we're learning all of this, like little comments. I kind of like it a wee bit, but yeah, it's kind of cool. So Sabrina, hi Sabrina, agrees that fam trips are not sustainable. And one idea, Sabrina, which Sabrina does really, really well. So check out what Sabrina's doing with Copenhagen right now, is using tools like social media and influencers to be there and to show the region through their eyes as well, and to help market the destination. Kenji, regional focus definitely happening across the outdoor recreation sector. One thing that we've been also helping or advising our clients on is the hub and spoke model. So meaning, you do not have to have one annual event and try to get everybody in there. Do the regional shows, do the regional meetups, do a road show if you can, bring out an RV that has like a learning area in it. Be creative. And it is not all about the numbers. And Thomson, I kind of like your idea of events putting a cap on how many people they would want there, and then anything over, turn that into a digital audience, or turn that into some kind of other event. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the numbers. What we're doing right now is not only cutting the shit, we're actually flipping the script on how people are putting their events together.
With the capping, Dahlia, just to say something's really important with that model as well, is that 1,000 of those tickets are really cheap. Because as soon as you cap something, what tends to happen is the price rises, and only people who can afford to go to that event pay. And that doesn't tie in with your other ESG goals. Our event should be saying, we have got 1,000 tickets that can attend for $100, because we realize that we need to bring new people into our industry, that we have to support small companies. We have to realize there's a huge amount of people who would love to come that we can't. So we've got 25% of our tickets are 100 quid. All the rest of them are 500 quid. But we really need to think about kind of pricing models to make sure that the right people can attend our events, because if events have become very exclusory, and we are saying to people, if you can't afford to come to our event, you're missing out on all the things that's happening here. And we have to be really conscious that our events have to be much more, we have to have much more engagement from a different community, and pricing's a really important part of that. And I would just go back to the fam trip, because it's, if you want to do 2 fam trips a year, that's great, but don't do 20. If you're really serious about a venue, don't go and see 5 different venues, go and see 2 or 3. So we really need to bring this idea down of doing less to have more of an impact with less resources. And however we do that, and everyone who's watching, without a doubt, can go back to their business and say, we're spending a lot of resource or a lot of emissions on that. How can we do it differently so we don't have less of an impact, but we use a lot less of the resources? And I know that we could all do that, going back into the office, later today.
Liz, how many site visits did you do like a couple months ago?
Well, actually, so we looked at over 50 venues for this one event online. I did 0 site visits actually, because it was just a smaller event, and we were able to nail it down without having to physically see the venue. So there, you don't even have to do a site visit. That was in our city though, so we didn't have to go, to other countries. I would not recommend doing without a site visit.
But the last thing I wanted to say was very briefly looking forward, and I kind of want to look at an events industry in 2040 that isn't able to go to their certain venues because it's now flooded. It regularly floods. The conference centre is now really, it floods every few months. This is what's bound to happen in the low-lying places. And if you think about most of the conference venues that we know and exhibition venues, they're all on rivers or they're next to the sea. But there's a huge issue with rising sea levels, and we're an industry that's looking at these events, and a lot of our venues might not be there in 10 years. And I don't know if it's going to be that needs to happen for people to realize, oh my God, I can't go to Pittsburgh this year because it's flooded every 2 weeks, before we start to make a change. But this is happening all over the world, and until we see it on our doorstep, I don't think we've got that real motivation to make a difference, unless we really open up and see that we can and we need to make change now. But looking ahead, the events industry is going to be so different in 15 years because it has to be, rather than, unfortunately, because it wants to be.
No, good point. One last question, and I think we should wrap it up. So Faya says, how will the metaverse impact sustainability in meetings and events? Bruno, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think that once we figure out what that means, it's going to be crucial. It will be absolutely crucial for our planet and our relationships with other people. And it's just the idea of feeling as if you're in an environment without having the environmental and all the other degradation associated with it is, I think, critical and huge for us going forward. Forget all the NFTs and all that other, crypto, whatever. It's a technology and a concept that I think has absolute fundamental merit for us as an industry.
I guess that's our next topic, or maybe in the next couple of weeks, just planting the seed. Shapiro, any last advice, points? What do you think?
I'm honestly, I'm wondering, Dahlia, do you have a dashboard where you can see how many heart attacks might have occurred during the course of the conversation?
I will check LinkedIn, but I have to tell you, we are in the business of giving heart attacks. Nothing will get done unless we get holy shit moments like this happening. Don't you agree? I mean, really.
I agree, personally. By the same token, I'd like to say, it was a destination that sponsored this report. I think destinations and their sustainability efforts have a very significant role in the business events industry right now, especially in the United States, where the government regulations you're talking about, William, are much slower to come than they are for global companies, but especially in Europe. So I think, yes, for the environment, we need to act faster, but also I think that there is value in taking better solutions as they happen. If destinations have measurements put out for event planners that say, look, this is what you can be saving, this is what you can be doing, this is what contribute to your net zero goal, like what we can do for you here, I think it's a very valid and productive conversation to be having right now. But again, with the idea in mind that in the long term, we have to reevaluate our metrics for measuring success.
Mm-hmm.
Well, destinations, a lot of them have money, which means they have power. So they actually can be at the forefront of making these changes if they care to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's for their best interest that they should team up and care to do so, like ASAP.
Mm-hmm.
But Bruno, Liz, any last thoughts? We're going to wrap this up. Are we good? Was this good?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Well,
always good.
that's debatable. I'm sitting here trying to reconfigure, how can I convince my family that our next vacation is to a B2B event so that I can share my personal carbon allotment?
I think there's going to be some of that happening as well.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank Shapiro and Thomson. Thank you for being guests with us, for cutting the shit from the get-go, from minute 2, I want to say. If anybody wants to be a lifeline, would love to have you on the show. Go to dahliaplus.com/cuethegenius. Take another listen to either our past episodes or this one. Please share. Please comment on social media as well. Let us know what your thoughts are. Did we give you a heart attack, so that we can get that heart attack factor in as well? And any other topics that you want to discuss. We truly, truly want to be just here for you. We cue your geniusness. I will never get that right. But we want it to be that we're very transparent. We are talking about conversations and topics that are relevant and need action right now. Even though we've been talking about it for 30 or 50 years. But thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next week. Ciao.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.